He's got the mic, the crowd goes wild, talking dreams we chased since we were both just a child. Entrepreneurs' heart beats like a midnight train in the game of sales.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Elite Real Estate Podcast one more time for another edition. So super excited about today's guest, and we're going to get into this here in a second here, but the Elite Real Estate Podcast, you can find the eliteedgenetwork.com. You can find us on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Twitch, on Facebook, on Instagram, and pretty much everywhere you can find anything. So look for the Elite Real Estate Podcast, the Elite Network on YouTube. You can find us there. Make sure you subscribe, like, follow, do all that stuff with the Elite Network on YouTube, and we'll go from there. So, but I'm super excited about my guest today. I'm going to bring him up here in a second. Mr. Eddie Speed, everybody, welcome him in. Welcome, my friend. How are you doing today? I'm good. I'm great. I am great. How are you doing this afternoon?
I'm good.
Good. So, yeah, I was diving into you and trying to figure some things out, and I was very excited to get you on today to talk about this note buying, right? And NoteSchool and all the things that you've done. And 40 years in the industry, and you must have started when you were 10, right? Because
I started when I was 20.
Amazing. You're the example of when I tell everybody now, like, I wish I would have started this when I was younger, right? Yeah. But you actually did that when you were younger. So talk to me about that. What is note buying, and what even to our listeners, what does that even mean?
Well, I think there's two ways people can look at real estate. One way, of course, is that you physically own real estate. And the other way, you could just own a first mortgage on somebody's property. And so my specialty is seller finance notes. I bought, bank loans. In fact, you and I were talking about that before we started a little bit. Yeah. So I occasionally see bank loans, but I would be known as the guy around the country that's probably bought more seller financing than anybody. And that's what I've specialized in. And it's kind of when I started in 1980, people were seller financing property because of high rates.
Sure.
And so there's been all these cycles. And we sort of say right now that the reason the note space is very good is because of inflation. And that's kind of how when I started, clearly in 1980, there was inflation. So not exactly the same market conditions, but usually there's some disruption is what causes notes to be real active.
Got it. And so talk to me about the 20 years old, Eddie Speed, 20 years old. How did this come about? Like, how did this happen, and where did it evolve?
Oh my God, I was a hot mess. Really?
It's a story I've heard in real estate all too often.
My father-in-law and a partner got me started in the business. He wasn't my father-in-law at the time, but I knew my wife, Martha. We've now been married 42 years, by the way. But, her dad was a pioneer of this business, and he and this other guy, and he was a real estate investor. The other guy came from the savings and loan industry. And of course, seller financing became a big thing. And then all of a sudden people had all these notes, and how would I sell them? How would I liquidate them? So I started with them. There wasn't any kind of training. There was just kind of fall into it. I literally didn't know anything. I started out calling on, they'd send me out to go call on realtors and home builders and real estate investors and say, hey, you got any notes to sell? Well, it wasn't that uncommon in 1980 to find people that just carried notes because they had to. Right.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where it led me to it. And then my wife and I married in 1982 and moved to the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And, I just stumbled into different ideas. I remember in late 1982, I have dyslexia, and I really can't spell very good. And I'm 65 years old and I still can't spell very good. And, so my wife was helping me at the office, and I figured out I could take the back of a deed of trust and write down exactly, the people's address. And I've realized, oh, wait a minute, that document's recorded of record. I can mail them a letter and tell them they could sell that loan. So I was the first guy to ever do courthouse research to either buy houses or notes and say, send them a solicitation from courthouse research and say, hey, you can sell your note. So they're just things I stumbled into. I met a guy in the, probably around 1986 or 87 that was named Ken D'Angelo. And he was going to build a franchise for people buying houses called Homevestors. And so I became their note guy. Like, I didn't work for them. I was their note buyer, but I built a whole system where their franchisees had a recipe of how to make seller financing.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, well, congratulations on the wedding too, by the way. Like, that 42 years is nothing to sneeze at, right? I've been married for almost 25. So I get it. But congratulations on that. But here's the other thing. What you talked about, high rates. Well, what do you mean? The rates are high right now, aren't they?
The average interest rate over the last 40 years is 7.7% interest.
It's funny for people that don't understand, right? The interest rates in the 80s, even the 90s, were way higher than what we were dealing with right now. This 7% of everybody's panicking about these high interest rates of 7%. But the issue obviously we got into, we were staying at those 2s and 3s and we probably stayed at the 2s and 3s for probably way too long. Legitimately for our economy to handle it. And so we needed to increase that a little bit because those 2s and 3s can only survive for so long.
Well, what's funny about, and my market is very good right now, right? And the reason that's true is because of inflation, right? Yep. Inflation has caused other market variables to be tougher than they used to be. And so now all of a sudden, other notes have now lined up. Notes have now aligned themselves as more of a premier investment. And once again, I got, 4.5 decades in this business, right? So, I've seen lots of things happen, but it's been 20 years since I've seen notes really line up to be that good compared to other like real estate strategies.
Got it.
Yeah.
So the idea is to buy the note and then sell it. That is it the trade-off? Was that the idea for this?
Well, obviously if I've done 50,000 notes, which is about kind of what I've done, obviously I've sold a lot of loans, but I like to, my deal is showing people different techniques so that you can buy a note and then recapitalize and not have to go sell the whole note. You could do, various ways of accomplishing that. And so the idea here is let me give you the simplest of math kind of start, right? Just to compare something, right?
Yeah.
So I live in Dallas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, the normal, not C- neighborhood, but a rent house today is about $250,000, right? And it's crazy. It seems crazy, but it is what the market is. So it used to be worth $140,000. Now it's worth $250,000 for the same house, right? Sadly, though, the rent hasn't really changed that much. So when it was $140,000, the rent might have been, $1,500, right? Now all of a sudden it's $250,000 and the rent's $1,800.
Yeah.
Right. But the problem is because of inflation, you're netting less money. And so now all of a sudden you take this $250,000 house and it rents for $1,800 a month and $900 of it goes to expenses. Right. Now now for your $250,000 investment, you're netting $900. People don't like that. That don't sound very good. It's not a very good cap rate. Right. So that's kind of where the market is. And so if you took $250,000 and we took like last year, we helped a lot of our students buy notes, hundreds of notes, many notes, right? Then they got about $2,700 in income on the same $250,000 deployed. And so it's honestly right now, it's kind of a 3x number.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So yeah, and so you said students, like, so let's NoteSchool. What's NoteSchool, and then again, how did you come up with NoteSchool, right? Because that was probably a new concept too, right?
Well, my first 20 years in the business, I'm not a guru now. I'm really not. If I'm anything, call me a guru because I'm really in the business, right? And we've all seen the others.
I
We've
like
seen
that.
the other side, right?
Yeah, that might have to be, one of these things I always try to come up with is like some T-shirt ideas, right? Instead of a guru, a duru. I think that might be a T-shirt idea for me.
So for the first 20 years, I was just in the note buying business to set up the note system for home investors. That's how I've done so many note deals. Is I worked with professional real estate investors to manufacture seller financing to a formula, my formula. So then I could go take their loans in the secondary market and go trade them. Which if they just make up something on their loan, they're going to miss things that are critical underwriting variables. And then I can't go trade their loan at all, or can't go trade it for as much money. And so that's how I started. Is I really just took seller financing and kind of pasted mortgage banking over the top of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's been my whole business philosophy for years. And then because of home investors, I started appreciating the value of real training. Give people a formula, give them all the tools, and then you can really go then do it right. So that became my idea of how to go build NoteSchool. And I've changed over the years. Yeah, obviously after 2008, we bought a lot of non-performing notes, right? But I've primarily been around the seller finance space. I deal with a lot of real estate investors today, both guys that do land and guys that do houses. And I kind of do the same thing. I give them a formula. I teach them how to go create good notes. And then most of my NoteSchool audience are realtors, dentists, retirees. Like, think about it. Somebody that does not want to go spend the time to manage a bunch of rentals, but they are comfortable with real estate. We do really well with that audience.
Got it. It's interesting that you say dentist, because I know a few dentists that are all trying to, like, I don't know if they want to stop being dentists.
They
or
do.
they just,
They do.
people don't understand the stress of being a dentist. I don't want to get into that in the show, but there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's any different than any other entrepreneur, right? I think it's no different than what you do or what I do, as far as pressure and the art of the deal and, putting things together. And I think that's one of the things that I see with guys like you, that you've been doing this for so long, that you can then leverage yourself, leverage your knowledge to then teach other people, to then again help you get leverage and have more people learn what you're doing.
Well, and once again, it's market timing. Right now, I'm teaching people and doing note strategies or selling their rental and owner financing it. All of that math today is very advantageous today compared to other markets. And in other markets, I've done different things, right? I mean, so I'm always looking for the void in the market, and how can I help somebody if there's a void? How can I help them with a strategy? Right now, the gap's really wide because people with rental properties are pretty frustrated. So I don't know exactly what the Detroit market is. I have a lot of real estate investor friends in Detroit. I've known them for years. And so I wouldn't say that I'm the crazy knowledgeable value versus rent in Detroit. Usually Detroit's going to be lesser than most markets. But let's say you're in Atlanta. Say you're in Phoenix. Say you're in Tampa. Say you're in Denver. Okay? Go take your current fair market value of your rent house and go take the net income, like average it over 3 years, not over a month, but average it over 3 years. Just easy math. If the house was worth $200,000 and your net is $8,000 a year. We're not talking about debt service. We're talking about outside of debt service. What's your cap rate? It's 4%.
Yep.
That sucks.
Yeah.
And that's what people generally are finding right now. And so with that, and by the way, let me tell you how I think this relates to your real estate brokerage. If I could help your brokerage team with this formula of how to make seller financing correctly, not accidentally, not do it like a lot of realtors that represent a client doing seller financing, nobody's involved in due diligence or underwriting or structuring the deal. It's not done well, right?
Right.
But I work with a lot of realtor groups, and I show them how to do it correctly. Now, all of a sudden, think about it like this. You've got a client base when listings are not as good as they could be, right? You've got a client base that now all of a sudden you could go to people with rentals and say, let me show you a strategy. Screw being a landlord, be the bank.
That's a lot less of a headache.
A lot less of a headache and probably 2.5 times the cash flow.
Unbelievable. Yeah, it's how has the market, I know, has changed. Obviously, we talked about 2008, right? Obviously, we see the market do what the market's going to do. The market's always going to do what the market's going to do.
Yeah.
But how has like this market when rates went up so quickly, a year and a half ago, when rates spiked quickly, how did that affect your note buying?
Well, it obviously the tougher that conventional lending is, either underwriting or rates. And underwriting is as big a problem today. Mortgage underwriting is as big a problem as rates. Everybody blames it on rates, but the Mortgage Credit Availability Index before the virus started, the day before the virus started, it was at 185. Today it's at 95, meaning that half of the Fannie Freddie loans out there are originated just because that's how tight underwriting is. But the inflation thing really beat up the rental model. And I think that's not what people thought was going to happen. In fact, I'm pretty sure they didn't think it was going to happen. But your house doubled in value. That's a good thing, right? But your income didn't double. In other words, your house went up. Your house went from 100 to 200, right? But rents went from 20% up. Expenses went up by 60%, but not rents. And so the same rent house had way better returns and way better cash flows in 2019 than they do today on the same house. And so that's why landlords are spinning around, is that they've now dealt with it long enough. They've gotten tired of it. When it first started happening a couple of years ago, they're like, yeah, it's okay. Now all of a sudden they're like, hey man, values are kind of flat. This thing is not cash flow. And I have, if they stress test the income, they usually don't like what the math it shows them.
Right.
And by the way, there's 17 million rent houses. I don't need to go tell everybody in the world how to go sell their rent house. If somebody wants to really stress test it, then we're pretty good at helping them. And if somebody's just enamored, like, hey, no matter what the math tells me, I'm not going to change my mind. I'm like, hey, dude, no problem. But the math is what the math is.
The math is going to math, and that never changes. The math is going to math. Yeah. Incredible. So currently today, you're seeing it's a good market to get into notes right now.
We have an inordinate growth in the market today. And because we've reached a point where the landlords have now figured out they're not liking their math. They're running this litmus test.
Yep.
And they're like, hey man, and once again, like, everybody can be a genius when the market's taking care of you. When houses were going up 20% a year, who couldn't be a genius, right? You could buy a property and pay too much and the market would take care of you. But now all of a sudden things have gotten pretty flat and people are looking at it going, these houses are a lot of work. And I think, that probably one of the biggest and underserved markets is realtors, quite honestly, because I think they could go to landlords and show them a solution that the landlords would have never thought of on their own. It's very legit. And we're teaching people, you're an old mortgage guy, right?
Yep.
We're just teaching people to create non-QM loans. These aren't risky loans.
Right.
40% of the market's non-qualified mortgages.
Yeah.
And
you're right. Like, because again, I thinking about the markets, right? A couple years ago, even to be a realtor, it wasn't hard. Like you sometimes you don't put a sign out. House is going to sell. All you got to do was put it on the MLS. You were going to have a lineup out the door. You were going to get 40,000 over asking. It was layups. Now the last year and a half, 2 years, it's been tough sledding. It's back to I got to pick up the phone, I got to dial, I got to actually do some work, right? I have to go now, and then we had the NAR settlement, right? And then we had to go explain why a buyer should pay us to take them out to show houses. Like, what's our value proposition? What does it mean to be a buyer's agent? Do you just go open a lockbox, or do you actually provide some value, right? Yeah. So that was a lot of teaching that I had to do, was teach agents how to become like show that their value. Now what you're talking about is now another layer of value that you could bring to a whole different market. And I really love working with investors. And the reason I love working with investors so much is there's no emotional ties to the home.
Correct.
It either is making me money or it's not. And I either need to get rid of it or keep it. There's not like, well, I raise my kids in the house. There's none of that. It's either making me money or it's not, and I got to lose it. Right. So that's why I love doing this. And this is, like you said, this is a whole nother layer for real estate agents if they're paying attention to this whole thing.
Yeah, and the other thing that we're good with agents is we show them how to build retirement models. So, we show people how to buy notes, but there's another side to that, and that is there's financial modeling that you can do that we're good at and we teach very well. Like if you paid $100,000 for a note, you can go sell the first half of the payments on the note, maybe get $96,000 of your money back. Now you have $4,000 invested and you own the back half of the payments. So there's some leveraging strategies that we're really experienced at, have done it, let's say, tens of thousands of times.
Sure.
And so we show people these strategies. Then now all of a sudden the realtor goes, whoa, now I can have a retirement. And so I train a lot of realtor groups now because, first of all, they can help their clients with seller financing, right? That wasn't even a thought until we kind of invent the idea with them, right? But more importantly, they're like, these notes, I like them, right? I get you get a check every month. It doesn't take a lot of work. And so there's a cushion factor. If you paid $100,000 for a note, maybe the property's worth 150. God forbid something happened. You got way more cushion than that than you do some other kind of investments. And people say, you know what? I never dreamed about it, but I make a living selling property, but I like these notes for my wealth building.
Yeah. Well, that's because have you ever been to a real estate agent's retirement party?
Yeah.
Nobody has, because we don't retire.
Yeah. I know they're retained. I've trained a whole lot of really high-end groups. Like I have friends that are like run masterminds for realtors that want like a wealth side, right?
Sure.
And so I've done that and been the guy that they brought in to teach these financial modeling techniques. And I know how much that realtors like it. And like I said, I mentioned dentists because I just happened to have some connections with some guys that had connections with dentists, right? But it doesn't matter who it is. I mean, it's anybody that likes real estate, but there's things that they don't like about real estate today. They don't like managing them. They don't like the cash flow. And so they're like, okay, well, is there any alternatives? Well, why don't you earn a first mortgage on somebody's house? By the way, the income's probably 2.5 to 3 times better than what you're netting on a rental.
Right. These are the pieces we miss, right? Like, and again, this is the reason that I really love real estate so much. And I don't know if you feel the same, but the reason I love real estate so much is there's so many fingers to it, right? There's so many things, investments and flips. And, now some of them are harder work than others. Some people enjoy flips. I've done a couple flips. It's a lot of work, right? Like it's a lot of work, and you got to be quick and efficient with them if you want to make your money out of it. And same thing with like a flip and hold, right? Or a buy and hold. It's great. But again, now you're a landlord, and do you really want to be a landlord? And then people say, well, I can hire a property management company. You can. But are you making enough to pay are you going to make anything off of this deal?
Well, somehow the phraseology has gotten confused. And like I said, I'm in a number of real estate masterminds where the top 500 house buyers hang out, and they run, property management companies, and they own significant portfolios and stuff. So I know that herd pretty well. But rental properties and passive income shouldn't be in the same sentence.
That's interesting you say that. Why? So why do you think that? Because that's what most people think.
You got to make a lot of decisions, even if you have a management company. Property management, you can't turn every decision loose to the property manager, right? And so when you can't do that, then that means you got to stay involved, right? And let me ask you a question. How many people that have had the same property manager for 3 to 5 years, and you say, how'd your property management going? Oh my God, it couldn't be better. Like, these guys are unbelievable. Like, there's nothing that I would change a single thing that they do. You hear that conversation very often?
Not really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, not really.
So understand, and I'm not dogging property management companies. They've got a tough job.
Yeah.
And so it's not really even the property management company's fault. It's the asset class. It's a high touch, high problematic asset class. And so, listen, once again, every dog has his day. If you'd have gone in the Detroit metro area and bought a bunch of rent houses in 2014, today you would be a genius. But you caught the market where real estate was on sale. But once again, the problem is, if you took that portfolio that you acquired and you run its current fair market value and you run a real cap rate based on its net income today, is that what you were expecting? And that's just the question I ask. Like, somebody may go, absolutely, I'm totally cool with 4% interest. Okay, well then you said I could do better than 4%. Oh, absolutely. So yeah. That's what I look at. It's like, it's not a debate with me. It's just that, there's an old saying, when you're a hammer, everything's a nail.
Yep.
Right. Well, when you're a landlord, you think of everything with a landlord's lens, right? Now, I'll admit to you, I'm a hammer too. I'm a seller finance guy, but it's just, I happen to be in a cycle where the math is way to my advantage right now. Right. But I'm realistic. I mean, I'm not saying that rentals are always bad. I'm just saying rentals aren't always good.
Right. And again, in this, like you said, in this market with the inflation and homes rising, the rental market's not that great, because now you're paying more for the house, and how much are you going to charge for the rent? Right. I see in the Metro Detroit area, I see what rents are going for, and I'm thinking, I wouldn't rent that house for $2,500. That's crazy. It's double what you'd even pay that's double what you'd pay for a mortgage. Now, I realize that you're renting because you probably can't get a mortgage. There's a whole lot of that goes into that. But at the same point, I just think, like, again, back to, and then it goes, then back to this, we've got 8 inches of snow outside, right? Who's taking care of that? Property management company, right? How much is that costing you extra to get rid of that snow that's out there? Or it just happened in a Southwest Detroit neighborhood. They had a water main break, and the house is all flooded. And guess what else they did? They just all froze because it's negative temperatures out there. So they got a 4-block radius of houses and cars frozen in ice right now because of water main break.
Man, here's the point. The point is when the market turned a certain way. I mean, you're an ex-mortgage guy, you're a seasoned realtor, you're all these, like, who would have figured in their life that we're going to go lock everybody up in their house and tell them they got to wear a mask in the house, right? Now real estate's going to double in value. People are going to lose their mind trying to buy real estate. Would anybody have predicted that?
No.
I mean, that's crazy behavior.
Yeah.
But the point is that's what the market did. And so understand that I feel like now, as a kind of a gray-haired guy in the business, my point is just to say, stress test the math, stress test some things about the market. And is the market telling you something different than you were sort of programmed to think? Because I can tell you this, when the virus first came along, if you would have said, Eddie, there's just going to be a FOMO of people wanting to buy properties. And I'm thinking like, what? There's no way. That's illogical behavior.
Yeah.
But it's what happened. So
And
listen, we've all been surprised.
Yeah. We went through a 2-year run of real estate, of a booming real estate economy for 2 years, probably 2.5 years out of a pandemic. And who would have thought that, again, now we're seeing the opposite effect of this. Now we're seeing realtors get out of the business because now it's hard again, right? Now you got to actually pick up the phone. You got to actually talk to people, right? And we're seeing them get out of it.
I want to tell you a word of encouragement. Okay. I've learned some very creative financial modeling techniques with notes. I mean, I think you would be impressed, right? This stuff that we've learned, how I learned most all of those techniques? In bad times.
Right.
Right. I learned the most in bad times. I just had to remember them when we were still in good times too.
Yeah.
Right. But I would say that, the realtors that are looking at, this market and they see, it kind of looks black to them a little bit. And I'm thinking like, now's the time you can go be more innovative than somebody else.
You need to be.
It would help.
Yeah, you need to be. Right. Because again, I go back to, and I coach and train a lot of agents across the country. And one of the things I always go back to is like, what is your value proposition? What are you bringing to the table? How well can you put a deal together, right? Because not all deals are created equal, right? And a good colleague of mine, a business partner of mine, always says too, like every deal can get put together just too much how much hair you have on it, right? Like you can still put it all together, just how much hair can you have on it? So you're right. Well, again, what's the value proposition? Can you put deals together? And now this idea that you've got, which is not a brand new idea, obviously you've been doing it for a long time. But that people just don't understand it. And now with NoteSchool, talk to me about NoteSchool. How did that come about? Like, where did that come from? And how did you decide to then start teaching everybody this? Right? Because
my original reason for NoteSchool was basically trying to go train people to go do the business so I could do business with them. That was my original reason for doing it. And once again, I'd been around Homevestors. And so the guy that founded Homevestors, and I saw that he had these franchisees and he trained them and they knew what to do. He could go take somebody that sometimes people have bad habits in real estate. You know what I'm saying? So he wouldn't take everybody as a franchisee just because they'd been doing it, because sometimes they weren't going to change their old bad habits, so to speak. Right. Sure. But I watched him teach people and they did it well. And he was a very innovative guy, the guy that founded the company. And so I thought like, hey, there's something to training. And I realized I saw people trying to be in the note business, but they didn't really know how to do it. The only thing I've got is a compression of time. I'm not smarter than anybody else. I'm just more seasoned on this subject. And so I just looked at it and said, this is my value add. I've got a compression of time. I had a compression of time 25 years ago when I started NoteSchool. I'd been doing it 20 years.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden I have a compression of time. Like if I pointed out anything to anybody in your audience today about how to analyze rentals, it's just because I wake up thinking about it. It's not like, I didn't read it in a book somewhere. I had to go figure it out.
Yeah.
In fact, I'll tell you exactly who put the idea in my head about the take your current market value. It was a top guy with Keller Williams. He's a top 10 agent with Keller Williams. Has a gigantic team.
Got it.
And he was at an event I was at. And he says, Eddie, and he was in Phoenix. And he said, I took my current fair market value of my rental portfolio. And he said, then I took my net operating income. I divided over 3 years because that seems to be a real number. And he said, I'm earning less than a 4 cap I said, I'm not surprised. And he's a savvy guy, like crazy savvy. And he was like, boy, that's bad news. And I said, well, it's more profitable to be the mortgage company today than a landlord. And I said, I just think I have seen the math enough times that, like, as crazy as that may sound, it's just the truth because of inflation.
It's math, right? The math. It never. You can't trick math. You can't lie about math. You can't.
I have a really very seasoned investor friend, and we were having this conversation literally a week or two ago. And he said there was sort of a cultish type mentality that went around rentals, and people said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to have rentals. And no matter what the market was doing, it was like they couldn't see it until they stopped back and look. And now people have gotten frustrated because they start realizing that, the inflation has continually bitten into their cash flow.
Right.
Everything's more, right? Insurance, taxes. We all know the deal. The repair demand's more. It's this, it's that. Insurance is like crazy how much it's gone up.
Yes.
Of course, taxes and all the other expenses. And the best operators I know, and I know some guys that have from 100 to 1,000 houses in their portfolio. So mega seasoned operators. They're like, you can't operate for less than 50% today. 50% of gross rents goes out in expenses. Well, the problem is, though, that then rents hit a ceiling. You can only charge so much in rent, and then all of a sudden, so it doesn't seem that the expenses hit the same ceilings that rents have. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. And the crazy part about the expenses are all the materials have gone up, right? Like, you need a new hot water tank. Well, a new hot water tank now is twice as much as it was than 4 years ago.
Correct.
Right. Same thing. HVAC, everything, something goes out. Roofs, but roof material than it was pre-COVID. Everything's 50, 60% higher at least than it was pre-COVID. So anytime you have a repair to a rental, you're digging into your profit if there is one.
Well, you think about all of the versions of real estate. You and I were talking about this before we started, right? There's all these versions of real estate.
Yeah.
And nothing is great for 20 straight years. You agree with that? Like, there's no market condition. Like, people, let's be honest about it. People losing their mind on commercial, on like multifamily. Like, just you couldn't make a mistake. And I'm sitting there looking at it going like, oh no, they're headed for bad times. I'm saying this like a couple of years ago. And people have thought they literally thought I need to be in a straitjacket. Like, the old man has lost his marbles. Now, all of a sudden, the market slid back 20 to 25%. It's kind of what they're saying. And there's still a slide left in it, probably. And now all of a sudden, it's like, nobody's arguing with me so much anymore. But I wasn't like enamored with it. I wasn't like against it. I just looked at it more realistically, I think.
Sure.
And so I think that as we look at any deal, and let me be clear about this. The seller finance note buying business isn't also been perfect for the last 4.5 decades. It's had bad times too, right? It's hard to seller finance somebody when interest rates are 2.5% interest.
Right. Well, so, and here's the other thing: the market's going to do what the market's going to do, right? It's no different than the NASDAQ or Dow Jones. It's no different than any of those things. It all is the same. The market's going to do what the market's going to do. It's going to fluctuate and turn. The idea is that you have some different options, and this is where people miss. They just don't understand the options, right?
That's it.
They just don't understand the option. And I think your option it sounds incredible, but you're right. Nothing is perfect. There's no perfect investment, right? There is no, if there was, we'd all be, Elon Musk, right? We'd all have Tesla.
Well, the point is, I will say this. I tell people you can own 55 rentals or 1,000 notes for the same workload. That's a truth, and that will be true every time. Now, that means that you're going to have discipline in who you lend money to. That doesn't mean that you can do seller financing wrong and it's going to be as good to you than if you do seller financing correctly, right? So I teach people proper underwriting techniques. What is acceptable buyer? What isn't acceptable? What's an acceptable down payment? All those things are like, there's an acceptable formula in there that has to be applied.
Right. Just like if you had a rental property and you rented it out to your best friend who stopped paying you in a month, right? Like you can't underwrite the wrong person either, and just loan money out to anybody. You still have to do the right underwriting. Like to your point, you still have to follow the correct process. You can't just willy-nilly this stuff.
There's best practices and there's best market timing. You can take the best practices and wrong market timing and you still don't have what you should have.
Say that again one time.
There's best practices and there's best market timing, right? Best practices is underwriting your tenant. Best practices is underwriting somebody you're going to sell or finance. Those are best practices, right? But when you apply best practices underwriting a tenant to the current market condition, you still don't have a great deal.
Yeah. And again, there's risk reward, right? It's like you sit behind me, take the risk or lose the chance, right? Like sometimes there's that risk reward that you have to take to at least try. You're investing, right? So again, there's a risk with every investment that you do. It doesn't matter what the investment is. There's always a risk.
There is a risk, but what I try to do is lay it out where people understand what the risk is. People that don't know what they're doing are they're like a guy walking across the interstate with a blindfold on. They have no idea if a car's going to hit them or not, right?
Right.
Like that's not investing. That's just foolishness, right?
Right.
So then with that then becomes risk assessment. And then, okay, I know I'm taking this risk. I know this can happen, but at least I understand what the risk is. And that should be true whether you're a landlord or whether it should be true whether you're owner financing a property or whatever you're doing, right?
Yeah.
So there are, as you well know, there's a lot of small-time landlords that aren't necessarily familiar with best practices of rentals, right?
Right.
Or there's another landlord that's like super tight, knows everything. I mean, like they're managed tightly, right? But once again, when the market's not being kind to them, obviously if somebody's doing risky things and doesn't know it, and then the market's not kind to them, that's really not a good situation. Right. But then there's people that do know how to manage tightly, and then the market's just not kind to them. And we can say it a million different ways, but it's a truth. You can do a perfect thing in bad timing, and it's far worse than doing the average thing in great market timing. It just is.
Yeah. Yeah. These are knowledge bombs. And I hope everybody that's listening is paying attention to what Eddie's saying here, because like these things are all so true. Now let me ask you this. How has over the years, obviously we've had a lot of technology changes, right? How has technology advanced this note buying? Is it helped it? Is it thrown more roadblocks in it? Like how has that helped everything?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like we close all of our note deals with one company now in the United States, and they're in Chattanooga, Tennessee, because the guy that owns it, that's where they live. Right.
Yeah.
But we buy notes in probably 40 different states, and we use technology to upload all the documents. And if I'm going to sell loans to an insurance company or to a NoteSchool student, or if I'm going to do all this kind of stuff, it's like, it doesn't remotely look like it would have looked like even 4 years ago. And with the efficiencies of it. And let me just tell you something. And you and I were talking about this, like blockchain is going to change a lot. You know, there's 17 counties in Texas. Of 152 counties, there's 17 counties in Texas right now that have recordings on blockchain. They say within the next 3 years, it's going to be 100%. So understand that yes, absolutely, technology is driving efficiencies in our business. And you know, I'm fortunate enough that I get to hang out with some people on the mortgage side that are really kind of cutting edge. And I'm applying some things to seller financing that just because I have some connections of people saying, hey, you know, Fannie Mae's going to move in this direction, you could do this. And so we're helping people with some efficiencies today that wasn't even a thought 3 or 4 years ago.
Right. And I find this like COVID. And again, though, during COVID, that sped up our technology, right? Like I think that sped up a lot of our technology only. And again, from the use of it, like just like you and I are on this today, right? You and I are on this today, just doing this whole thing and talking to each other. And I'm in Detroit and you're in Texas. So it's incredible how fast it works.
Yeah, it's very exciting to see, you know, the technology side. You know, there's industries that, you know, will be disrupted, and there's industries that'll be invented. And, you know, but one of the things that I do is I help people when they're seller financing. I help them with, like, think like a mortgage banker. If you're going to owner finance a property, don't think like homemade stuff. Like you're in Michigan.
Yep.
Let me take a wild guess. Everybody in Michigan, oh, a seller finance guy. He's a land contract guy. You know,
yep.
I'm like, why would you sell on a land contract? You know, the law that used to be why people sold on a land contract is obsolete anymore. It's called an equitable interest in property. So if you sell on a land contract in the state of Michigan, let me tell you something, boys and girls, they have an equitable interest in the property and you have to foreclose it out. You can't just go evict them. And people are like, well, no, I know how it used to be, but that's not how it is now. So I teach people to create seller financing, and it looks just like a Fannie Mae type loan, right? Why? Because I can make that paper's more valuable in the secondary market if people write it that way versus writing it on, you know, kind of the homemade way. So that makes sense?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And so those are the things where I help people with, you know, efficiency, and technology is certainly part of that. You know, like today you can go hire a third-party underwriter, and I can give you an underwriting box. Like, write the loan, Jimmy, to this formula. And you say, well, I don't have a license to underwrite loans. Okay, let me connect you with an underwriter. Like, I can do things now where you can essentially run your own, quote, mortgage bank with seller financing with confidence in a way that you could have never been able to do it in years past.
Because
that's the things that we're helping realtors with. If realtors have been guilty of not advising their clients well about seller finance techniques, that's all fixed now. We can do that.
Again, though, that's where the realtors who are listening to this need to leverage someone like yourself to figure out these things. Because otherwise, again, you said sometimes what realtors do, and I know this because I know a lot of realtors, is we put the blindfold on and walk into traffic because we just assume that we've got it figured out and we're just going to wing it in a sense, right? And I see it a lot recently. A lot of agents have come to me and said that they're going to get a license as mortgage officers, right? They're going to go with their mortgage license, and they're going to do the mortgage and real estate. And I'm like, well, it's like chasing two rabbits. You're never going to catch any of them, right? Because now you're chasing two, you're never going to catch the one. Well,
with the mortgage industry down about 70% in production, you might want to run some math before you totally lose your mind and go do that. And I'm not saying that I've got friends in the mortgage industry as well, of course. And so I'm not saying, but they're just trying to tough out a tough time in the market. I'm not sure that if one of my grown kids came to me and says, Dad, I'm dying to go become a loan originator. I'm not like, oh, the timing's perfect. Go do that. I'm
Right.
not sure I would say that.
Right. No, and I wouldn't say that about real estate either. Right. Like, I don't know that again, it depends on how hard you want to work. And I think it's the same thing with mortgages and everything else. But it's,
Can I tell you a funny story? Can I tell you a funny story? I want to go back to my very beginnings, right? 20 years old, dude, I was clueless. And these guys, these seasoned guys sent me out and they said, go call on realtors and home builders and real estate investors, right? I'm out, shoe leather time, right? I'm out hitting the pavement. Here I am, 20 years old. I don't know a 100th of what they know about real estate, but I'm in a business that's doing really good, which is notes, and they're in a business that sucks. Why weren't they teaching me?
Right.
Because they had a block and they couldn't reinvent themselves. That's all that it was. They had every advantage in the world. They should have been teaching me notes instead of me teaching them notes.
Yeah.
But once again, they were kind of at the wall and they couldn't really see. They couldn't see over the wall.
Yep.
And I would challenge a lot of your clients right now, or a lot of you people you help in real estate. Maybe you're just stuck in looking at the wall. Maybe there's an opportunity that is right in front of you if you just step back for a second.
Yeah. One of the things that I always compare that to, and I heard it a long time ago, was you're reading the label from the inside out, and you get stuck reading that label from the inside out. If you were to be able to step outside the bottle and read that label the other way, you're like, whoa, I can do that too.
Yeah.
Right.
If I were a realtor, I will tell you with 1,000% integrity, if I were a realtor, I would go out and do a mass campaign right now to go find landlords and show them how to seller finance. I promise you, and with everything in my being, that's what I would go do, because that's a problem that almost no realtors are solving.
And again, like I said, I've always loved working with investors because there's no emotional ties to anything. It's, when I go on a listing appointment, it's somebody that's lived in their house for 25 years and I'm trying to get them to list their house to sell. And they're saying, well, my house is worth this much because I raised Johnny in this house and Joey lived in that room and Susie was in that room. And, it's like, well, I agree. You updated, I updated the kitchen, but you updated it in 1997. It's not updated anymore. Right. Like, so that's why I've always liked to work with investors. In fact, I used to call on a lot of investors to try to list their house, right? To list the investment that they had. And that conversation was simple. Like, hey, what's the return you're getting on that house right now? Have you thought about selling it? And simple.
It's to get an investor and show them that they're not making the money on rentals they should be making is a one page on a yellow pad.
Yeah. Yep.
And so once again, and the other thing that I think is very interesting, and like I said, I work with a number of kind of more than one national franchise because of this market condition and because where we're at right now. And we've got a deliverable that we're going to offer your audience. So it's a little masterclass, couple of hours, right? Okay. And we're just going to go whiteboard it out in a couple of hours. And I guarantee they'll be like, oh my gosh, that is an angle that I don't know another realtor in town that's pursuing. I'm pretty sure that'd be true.
I said, I've looked into this before, we got on and I pulled up, eddyspeed.com. I was looking on there. Then I had said I had to go look at what like this note buying business was because I didn't know anything about any of this stuff. And now that we've gotten deeper into this conversation, I just, I'm super excited to learn more about this only because again, it's another facet of the industry that not a lot of people know about. And it's a value add for me as a realtor that I can take now to investor clients that I know and show them exactly what this looks like.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's incredible. So talk to me about like NoteSchool. We can obviously find you at NoteSchool and how do we find everything about you and where do we find you?
So the masterclass is going to be, I'm going to give your audience a link. We do sell this masterclass, but I'm going to give it to your audience. And that it's pretty simple. It's noteschool.com/elite, right? And so that's your audience. And this is what we're going to do in the masterclass is we're going to go through what I would say are different versions of financial modeling. Like I'm not exaggerating. 30 minutes before I got on your deal today, I was speaking to the National Association of Real Estate Investors. I was their guest for all of their people that have real estate investor clubs around the country. I do the same math. I'm showing them stuff and they're just like, because I'm showing them how to stress test the deal. I'm showing them a comparison in a very accurate way, but I'm showing them a comparison, and all of a sudden then they start seeing it. And then if they want to progress down the road, if they think NoteSchool could help them, I think we could. But if they think it's going to be like a no threatening deal, we'll show them how they can come to a class,
sure,
and dig in and do it. Most people, the surprise to them that people that enter the door from a real estate background is that they don't think about their personal situation until we start showing them what's possible. And these leveraging techniques that they could do where they could say, you mean my retirement account could have a first mortgage on somebody's house? Yeah.
Incredible. And here's a question for you too. And you've been doing this for a while. So I switched all my retirement account over to a self-directed IRA.
Mm-hmm.
Because I want to be able to invest more with it instead of just sitting there and collecting, whatever the percentage is a year that I had to blow the dust off it to figure out what it was doing, right? But I just switched all that over. So that's something I could then use and use for this as well, right?
So I've done training for more than 25 different self-directed IRA companies. And the reason it is because they've been down the road, they've seen me present somewhere, they feel like we have solid stuff. They have their clients have really good luck investing in notes. And so they love it. So yeah, I've done a lot of training for self-directed IRA companies in that regard. Yeah. Got
it. Yeah. And again, this another facet of learning about what like investing and all the things. There's so many things out there that real estate can provide. And again, it goes back to then who you surround yourself with matters. Right. And how do you learn these things, and finding, people like yourself to leverage, to learn this thing is super incredible. And I'm excited. I'm going to go look this all up right now. So always opportunity, right?
I'll tell you a funny story, Jimmy. And I didn't say this before we started, right? But I would say that virtually 100% of when I get invited on a podcast, the host of the podcast will then come to a masterclass. I mean, like virtually 100% of the time.
Yeah.
Right? And it's because I think it goes back to this. And I know I'm this way. Like you were sort of having a little fun with me because the particular software that you use was not super friendly to me. I had to have my tech guy come in there and get me wired up so we could do this thing. Right. And we're kind of laughing about it because I know I'm not, I'm old school and, I'm not, but I mean, it was kind of, he was kind of straining a little bit to figure it out.
Yeah.
And the point is we don't know what we don't know. Now, I didn't know how to get on your software today. Right. And I had to get some help. Right. But we don't know what we don't know until we know it. And then all of a sudden the world looks different. And that's just life.
Oh, I love that so much. And you're so right. You're so right. Like we don't know what we don't know, and the world can change in an instant, right? And the world can change in an instant, and I love that. And yes, you are right. It'll continue to be 100% of people that had you on a podcast that will come into your master class because that's what I'm looking. That's what I'm going to do.
Well, we haven't lost our track record then, right?
No, you will not, and you'll continue with it. You will continue with it now. So. Well, Eddie, my friend, I appreciate you guys. Check it out, noteschool.com/elite. Check it out. Eddie, I appreciate you, my friend. Thank you very much for coming on and joining me. I'm excited to, and again, we'll keep it at 100%. I'll be in that masterclass soon.
I'll look forward to seeing you. I'll be on the other side, I promise.
All right, my friend. I will talk to you soon. Thank you very much. Guys, thanks for dropping into the Elite Real Estate Podcast one more time for Eddie Speed and NoteSchool. I will talk to you all soon.